שלום לכם. יש מדינות בהן מערך הייעוץ של מדענים למקבלי החלטות מוסדר ומבוסס הרבה יותר מאשר בארץ. כדי להבין איך יחסים כאלה נראים בארצות הברית ובאילו אופנים תורמים חוקרים לקביעת מדיניות בדרגים הגבוהים ביותר, אני שמחה לשוחח עם פרופסור ברוך פישוף מהמחלקה להנדסה ולמדיניות ציבורית והמכון לפוליטיקה ולאסטרטגיה באוניברסיטת קרנגי מלון. פרופסור פישוף הוא חבר האקדמיה הלאומית האמריקאית למדעים וגם האקדמיה הלאומית לרפואה, והקים את הוועדה המייעצת לתקשורת סיכונים של ה-FDA, מנהל המזון והתרופות האמריקאי. וכדי שהשיחה בינינו תקלח, אני אעבור עכשיו לאנגלית. Shalom and welcome to Professor Baruch Fishof from the Department of Engineering and Public Policy and Institute for Politics and Strategy at Carnegie Mellon University. Hello,
Hello.
thank you for coming.
Hello.
The social sciences...
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So the social sciences have shown how lousy we humans are at making evidence-based decisions. A logical outcome might be to emphasize expert opinions that are backed up by more evidence. But in recent years, we have advocated more for public engagement with science, with giving different stakeholders more voice, democratizing science, and acknowledging the expertise of lay people. How can we reconcile these two ideas?
Maybe the first thing to do is to recognize that experts are humans or people too. That is, they have specialized evidence, they have specialized methods, but at some point with important problems, the methods run out. And the methods only work because they have a form of bounded rationality. That is, all of us who are claimed to be experts ignore many things in order to focus on the things that we know best. So when experts are making decisions, it's one should ask, well, what have they chosen to ignore? How well do they recognize the limits to their knowledge? How well do they fill in the gaps when they've run out of data? And that's just looking at the experts doing their own work as scientists or engineers. And then there's the question of, well, how well do they know and serve the audiences or their clients? So sometimes their clients are government agencies or firms, and sometimes their clients are the general public. And like everybody else, they typically don't know their audience as well as they should.
Well, you chaired committees on research and national security and cybersecurity and terrorism. In these fields, what kind of scientific advice do decision makers ask for?
Well, they often want to know how to deal with the public and how to get rid of a troublesome public that is standing in the way of their plans. And I would say they often confuse us experimental cognitive psychologists with clinical psychologists and think that we can help them with a crazy public. And our goal, our scientific and ethical responsibility is to start from the public, from its legitimate concerns and how well they're being addressed by the experts, which includes raising the probability that the experts may be part of the problem, either deliberately or inadvertently. That is, they may be in good faith failing to understand and address the public problems, or they may really consider the public find the public as an obstacle and look for grounds to ignore the public by treating the public as irrational.
So until now, we took the side of the public. Let's look at the scientists on this equation. How can scientists ensure that their contributions to decision making are used in an ethical way? Can they make sure that this happens?
So one thing that we can do as scientists is establish relationships with the people we are trying to serve. And those could be people in local communities, or they could be government regulators or administrators, or people in a firm we're trying to consult with. And establishing those personal relations creates a sense of moral obligation that people don't have when you're clients or your audience is just an abstraction. It gives people a legitimate sense that they can trust us, and it puts us in a position to understand the kind of complicated world within which they're living. We don't fulfill that obligation when we treat the world as a laboratory in which we can test some of our theories. A second thing we can do is recognize that our expertise is inherently limited, that if the problem needs a psychologist, I don't know all of psychology. My branches of psychology may not have all of the relevant knowledge, and I should be there as a representative of my discipline. I do most of my work in my engineering department, and their engineers are accustomed to working in problems with interdisciplinary and not just multidisciplinary working teams, where you want somebody who has deep and broad knowledge in their particular specialty and is willing to work together to pull the pieces together. That's different than the kind of sole proprietorship that is often common in disciplinary social sciences, where we just represent ourselves.
When I'm looking at the global ecosystem, particularly with climate change, it seems that policymakers select their scientists based on their preferred outcome. Is that a new phenomenon, and what can we do to combat it?
No, I don't think it's new at all that people cherry pick the data and cherry pick the expertise if they've decided in advance what's the conditions that they want to work. And I think it's flattering to be asked for your opinion, and it requires continuing self-reflection to see whether you're being used and to be willing to bring in other expertise if you think that they understood your clients have understood you correctly, but that you've only got part of the problem, or to refuse to be used.
If we're going back really to the scientists that wants their science to be useful but used in an ethical way, what have you learned after all these years as a scientist in the corridors of power? How would you advise a scientist who wants to translate her research into social impact?
So I would again recommend hanging out with people who know the problem. For those of us who are in academic institutions, you need support from your institution, because the time you're spending getting to know your problem, getting to know the people and the problem, is time that you're not turning out publishable papers and fattening up your resume. The counter argument is that by engaging with real problems and real people who are responsible for the problems, that you are improving the basic research. That is, you're seeing how well it generalizes in real world settings, and you're also seeing looking for problems that you might not have seen just working endogenously, following the curiosity that you get from sticking within a research program. So I think the long-term health of our science and our disciplines depends on how well we engage the world, seeing how relevant our theories are, and developing new ideas. Not all departments and not all disciplines will support that activity.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Baruch Fischof, from the Department of Engineering and Public Policy and Institute of Politics and Strategy at Carnegie Mellon University. It was a pleasure and a privilege to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.